I'm going to try to do this now. I don't know if I have enough time really to do it, but um, I want you to be able to see the higher truth. And to do that, you really need to understand the feast days. Because as I've mentioned to you before, the law is a type, a shadow, a pattern of the good things to come. And the feast days deal with God's calendar. So we're going to just go through this really quickly. But it probably will be a slightly longer video than the others, than most of the others. And you may have been in church your entire life. And I would dare say you don't know anything about the feast days. Because they're back in that law part, Deuteronomy kinds of things, and where you don't really read that much. First off, and I would encourage you to find somebody to study the feast days in depth, but a couple of things that I would say. Be careful, because so many people are not careful. They're not careful with the words that they use. They're not careful with things. Saw a deal the other day, and it was talking about the fact that we have 13 months and 28 days, and maybe that's right, I don't know. But they were using a Bible from like the 1700s, and it said this is proof that there's 13 months, and at the top of the inside cover of the Bible, of that particular Bible, it had the months listed, and it had Nisan, and it had Tishri. And when you study the feast days, just if you're studying from somebody and they're calling months Nisan and Tishri and those things about the feast days of the Lord, I would find somebody different, because God never named a month. God calls the month first month, second month, third month, fourth month. He never named a month, with one exception, and I'll go into that here in just a few minutes. But Nisan and Tishri and those months were Babylonian names that the house of Judah, when they came back from their Babylonian captivity, they brought those names with them. God never called a month Nisan. And so, or Tishri, or any of those things. So, God set aside 3 different times where all the people had to come to Jerusalem he gave them these feast days when they were in the wilderness, but ultimately they did those celebrations in Jerusalem. Side point, but we'll get there. Okay, 3 different times. And just so you know, God is not stupid enough to start his year in the middle of winter. Okay, and I'm going to say this point several times. You live in a world of deception. And a huge part of that deception is religion. And I'm going to make some points along the way. But God didn't start his year in the middle of winter. January 1st is not the first of the year. Okay? And this should be, well, there's still a vestige of the truth out there, but you don't really see it. For example, God's first month is sometime in our third month into our fourth month. That's when God's year starts. And you can see the vestige of this truth in the fact that, the first 8 months of our year are named after Roman gods. January, February, March, April, all the way through August. But then here's the vestige of the truth. September. Now, what month is September? It's the 9th month of our year. But if you have septuplets, you have 7 children. Excuse me. October. It's our 10th month. But how many arms tentacles does an octopus have? 8. November. Neve means 9. And December, it's our 12th month, but a decade is how many years? 10. Those are roughly the true months. Now there's other things that go into it, but God didn't start his year in the middle of winter. Now, the feast days were all around harvests. And so, in the first month, on the 14th day, it was known as Passover. Okay? And so you'll notice, just for you to notice this, the month started when you saw the very first sliver of the moon on the right side. That was the first day of the month. I might as well get into this here. So you've had 12 months. You've had 12 months, and the next month is going to be the first month of the next year. But you don't know exactly when you're going to see that sliver, but when you see the sliver for what could be the first month or should be the first month, you look at the barley crop, because that was the first feast. And the barley crop, if it's ready to be harvested, that will be the first month. If it's not ready to be harvested, you add a month called, and God's name for it was Abib. So this was a month that was added in because the crop was not ready to be harvested. Because again, the moon cycle and the cycle of the sun are not exactly the same, and so the seasons would get off if you're following the moon, which is what month comes from. unless you at some points in time make adjustments. And Abib was that adjustment. Okay, so this is the first month. 14th day, Passover. And that goes back to Egypt. And let's talk about this for a second. This may end up being a two-parter thing, but let's talk about this for a second. And this is what clued me in. That got me started on the feast days. 2009, maybe? 2008? Something like that. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. God's days start at sundown. So you need to think that through, because we spread 2 days over those periods of time. Again, everything is a deception. So for example, I'll put this in here because Jesus was crucified on Passover, and they left Egypt on Passover. So let's go back to Egypt, because it's the type and shadow of the reality to come. After sundown, the angel of the Lord came on Passover, and they had put the blood above their door frames. And the angel of the Lord passed over them, but it went to the houses of the Egyptians who did not have the blood, and it took their firstborn of every house. This is important because that was at night. So the next morning, when everybody wakes up in Egypt and the Egyptians have all lost their firstborn, including Pharaoh, Pharaoh wants them gone. He wants the Israelites gone. And so the Egyptians give them all their gold and silver, all of that stuff, and they are gone. All this happened on one day. Started at sundown and runs through sundown the next, what we would call the next day. But that is one day. It's going to be important for you to understand that when we get to the crucifixion. All right, first feast is what's known as, well, most people call it Passover. But the day after Passover starts a 7-day feast called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it's a 7-day feast. The first day is a high Sabbath day, which means no work can be done. Which will get to be very important. It's a 7-day feast. In the middle of that feast, and I'll get to the maybe I'll get to the particulars of it, probably around Jesus, when I talk about Jesus' crucifixion. But the particulars of it, in the middle of that week, you have the first fruit, Feast of First Fruits. Okay, so you have first fruits. So you've got the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you've got first fruits as part of that feast. And And first fruits is on the first day of the week, during the middle of the 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread. And that'll get to be important here in just a little bit when we talk about Jesus. Okay. The second feast is around the wheat harvest. And the wheat harvest is known as Pentecost. And the wheat harvest is when King Saul was crowned king of Israel. Later on, from the time that they left Egypt, but he was crowned king on that day. Now understand, the first feast was the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay? And I'm going to add this in right here, and then I'm going to make a point about Pentecost. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, we get our spring cleaning from this feast because everybody went through their houses to make sure there was no leaven in the house. They cleaned the nooks, the crannies, the corners, everything, because there could not be leaven in their houses. But we understand that on Pentecost, there's leaven around wheat. King Saul was crowned on Pentecost. He was not the true king. Okay, there would be another. Okay. Something happened Jesus' time, after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, and after the 40 days that he stayed on earth, because Penta means 50, and it was 50 days after first fruits. So that's why Jesus told them, hey, he told the disciples, stay in Jerusalem, because not many days from now, because he was leaving after 40 days, not many days from now, the Spirit is going to come on you. And Pentecost happened. Okay. I'm probably going to stop here. Heck, this may be a three-part deal, but I don't have time to continue right now. And we'll pick it up here, heading into Pentecost. I love you all.